Hi, welcome everyone. Let's get started. So first of all, I'm not a security specialist, but an electrical engineer. I spend most of my time by designing printed circuit boards and developing embedded firmwares and managing our digital product development company with my co-founders. I had a Hacktivity presentation back in 2011. It was about my favorite reverse engineering project, creating the full schematic of the MOS 6502 microprocessor. And the reason I'm here today is because I ran into a situation with a very popular apartment intercom system. Someone asked me to install one. After seeing how it worked, I was like, wow, I'm going to participate on Hacktivity again. So this is a classic example of facing vulnerability in an unexpected area. So this is what you see when you try to enter an apartment complex in Budapest. A device with a keypad, a display, a proximity card reader, a microphone, and a speaker. So you can enter with a PIN code, a proximity card if you have one, or you can ring a specific apartment by typing its number. And you can talk with the resident who decides if they want to let you in. And there are different types of apartment intercoms all over the city, but the one I'm talking about is one of the most popular types. And I'm not going to name it for legal reasons, and I'm not going to show any pictures about it for the same reason, so I have these drawings instead. And my goal today is to give you some insight of what kind of security concerns you might have when using an apartment intercom system. An apartment complex is always a crowded place, so people walking in and out 24/7. If you don't have an access, you can always pick a random apartment number, ring them and say, "Hi, I'm delivering a package," or "I lost my key card, please let me in." And at some point, someone will let you in, or someone just opens the door and you can follow. So this means we cannot have too many expectations here about the security, but people might have some minimum expectations, like my PIN code is my secret, my proxy card ID is also my secret, and I don't want to be trackable. And unfortunately, the device I'm talking about does not meet any of these criteria. It is a well-known fact that there are computers around us everywhere. So sometimes we do not realize it because it's become so normal. We don't see an intercom as a computer. All we can see is an entrance pad. But it is a computer. Of course, it's not a computer like the one on your office desk, but a smaller one. In fact, it is a single-chip solution called microcontroller, which is a basic component of an embedded system. A microcontroller contains at least one CPU, flash memory as a software storage, RAM as operating memory, and peripherals inside in one single chip. So the device we are talking about has a small microcontroller with 8-bit CPU, 7 kilobytes of flash memory, not megabytes, but kilobytes, and 256 bytes of RAM. I mean pure bytes without any prefix. So anyways, there are a huge variety of microcontrollers out there, specialized for different applications, and you can just pick the best suited microcontroller for your project and buy it. I mean, not today because of the pandemic. There's a global shortage of microcontrollers, but that's a different story. So one more thing to mention before we get into the details how the actual device works. Using an EEPROM, electrically erasable, programmable read-only memory, is quite common in embedded projects. Even if the microcontroller has flash storage for the firmware, it makes sense to store the additional config information somewhere else for multiple reasons. So on the slide, you can see an example timing diagram how to read a single byte from an EEPROM with I2C protocol. And anyone who has a good understanding in the I2C protocol is able to hack this device. So the front panel is the brain of the system. It decides who is allowed to enter. It contains the database EEPROM chip for PIN codes and key card IDs, and it makes the audio connection between the front door and the selected apartment. Let's see what happens if you, as an owner, would like to enter at the front door with your key card. First, the microcontroller processes your card ID by searching it in a database. So if your card is in a database, the microcontroller now knows which apartment it is associated with. Second, the front panel sends a signal to your apartment, and your local microcontroller in your apartment notices that it is being called by the front panel. And your apartment device makes a short beep to kindly inform your family members at home that someone is coming, and it sends back an acknowledge signal. Now, the main board knows that the apartment device is ready, so it allows you to enter by unlocking the front door. And the reason for this handshaking is that the main board wants to make sure the apartment device exists. So otherwise, it wouldn't allow you to enter. On the other hand, this handshaking allows a hacker to redirect the traffic, so we will see it in a few minutes. You don't need to be a hacker or an IT expert to get everyone's PIN code or card ID. So let's start with the screwdriver. Remove all 4 screws at the front panel. Then you can access the brain of the system on the other side where the main panel is located. And there is a handwritten 6-digit number on the printed circuit board. Guess what? That's the master password. And it is normal process of the manufacturer. So this is how the product is sold because they want to make sure you will never have any problems accessing the device. Moving on, next you need to pull the EEPROM from its socket and put it into a simple device called EEPROM reader. It gives you the access to the binary content of the database, and now you can put everything back to its original place. And as you can see, it only takes a few minutes to get the database content. And guess what else? It isn't encrypted, and the format is so simple that you can literally read it in a hexadecimal editor. There is at least one crazy person in every apartment complex. And what if this person's target to drive crazy is you? Let's assume this person doesn't want to touch the main board of the system at all. He wants to be low profile and operate inside his apartment only. He's not a professional hacker, but he managed to reverse engineer the protocol on the two-wire bus. And the protocol is quite simple. The transaction is only one single byte which refers to the targeted apartment. And by the way, I couldn't imagine any simpler protocol. So this is the timing diagram on the slide. So this is how the main board calls apartment number 10. And yeah, this is part of the handshaking I mentioned before. So this person buys a cheap microcontroller development board and writes a code which is able to catch the first 7 bits of the target apartment ID. And then the microcontroller forces the last bit to the inverted value. What happens? Well, every single guest who calls apartment 10 rings apartment 11 instead. So it is a redirection. So it sounds funny, but in real life it could be very annoying. Having a plain text database in a separate chip is a security hole itself. In addition, the database, the EEPROM, is hot pluggable because it has a socket. So if you pull it out and pull it back, then there is no warning or error message, like nothing happened. So a hacker could install a machine in the middle attack in 3 minutes without even shutting down the system. And the EEPROM socket is the best expansion port you can imagine. It has power supply and access to the I2C lines. So this is a perfect spot to monitor what is going on. So let's put an add-on board between the microcontroller and the EEPROM, and let's see how it works. So there is a silence on the I2C lines, and then the microcontroller starts reading key card IDs one by one. And at some point, the microcontroller stops reading, and there is a silence again on the I2C lines. So what is the conclusion? What happened is that someone wanted to enter at the main door with a key card. And this is why the microcontroller started reading the card IDs one by one, because there is no hash or index implemented. And finally, it did find it. And do we know who it was? Sure, it was the last position of the database read. So this is how an add-on board knows which apartment is being activated. Is it possible to implement a small radio transmitter on the add-on board? Oh yes, absolutely it is. The add-on board could transmit the apartment owner's schedule real-time over the air. And that's a problem in my opinion. People reuse PIN codes. I know well-educated people who use the exact same PIN code for the apartment intercom and for the credit card. And it is the same with proxy cards. So people do not want to carry a lot of cards in their pockets, so they register the same card in different buildings, like home, parents' home, gym, and workplace. And obviously, this is a risk they specifically signed for by not using different codes or different key cards. And this is why manufacturers need to pay more attention to handling our data. Even though we know that some of the users are careless, it does not mean the intercom system has to be fully unprotected. Actually, it is the other way around. So it makes even more sense for a manufacturer to protect the user data. So if clients aren't able to protect the data, then the computer should handle it. And what about tracking the users? So well, unfortunately, this is a real danger too. People in Hungary are afraid if there is any remodeling in their apartment complex. Remodeling means the front door is always open and strangers are walking in and out for a month at least. In Budapest, we have high rate of apartment break-ins after remodeling. So this is why I personally do not want to have a system that is so easy to turn into a spy device. Yeah, when I found these vulnerabilities, I contacted the manufacturer asking if they are aware of them. And the answer was like, hey, it's not a bug, but a feature. So they explained to me that this is a simple device originally developed in the 1990s, so no need to overthink the functionality. Sometimes the community builds a new fence door or a playground with a separate door, and people would like to use the existing PIN codes. So how would a mechanic be able to fulfill the request if he wasn't able to read all the codes? And they even sent me an example encrypted database of a competitor's product and saying, hey, the original mechanic isn't available anymore, so we have problems accessing the device. So how would you solve this problem? And a quote again, there are more mechanics than hackers, they said. Well, this answer surprised me a little bit. So now it's clear to me that they don't really see the apartment owners as real end users. The manufacturer's main focus is to make sure that the mechanics could install new devices quickly without having any access issue so they can have more sales. So the first recommendation is obvious, so encrypt the database at least. And the good news here is that the world is not black and white, so there are so many shades in between. Having an easy but not secure system like the one I'm talking about is one extreme. The full secure system, which does not allow you to change any settings in case the original mechanic isn't available, is the other extreme. So there is a good balance between security and usability. So let's imagine an apartment intercom which is secure and all data is encrypted and we cannot read the database in 3 minutes. So what if the owners would like to have a new fence door with the same access control? They call the mechanic and ask to install a new device with the same database. So do we want him to have all personal PIN codes? Is it necessary at all? No, definitely not. So we want him to go to the representative of the apartment complex and ask for a temporary access, which allows him to copy the encrypted database from the old device to the new device, and that's it. And unfortunately, having a good encryption requires bigger microcontrollers. The main microcontroller of the system I'm talking about has only 7 kilobytes of flash memory. So it means the software which runs the device cannot be bigger than 7 kilobytes. And embedded firmwares are pretty small in general, but 7 kilobytes considered extremely small nowadays. So in this case, the manufacturer does not really have a chance to fix all these security problems here with the existing hardware because the microcontroller is just too small. Yeah, that's the easy part. So do not use the same PIN code anywhere else, and do not use the same key card anywhere else. And be nice with your neighbors, especially with the crazy ones. And thank you for your attention, and feel free to ask me anytime.